Hey guys, what's going on out there? Welcome to episode 8 of Around the Bird Bath. This is Alma Audible's baseball centric podcast. This is your producer and editor, Jared Kalmus. Welcome you guys to this week's episode. This is in fact episode 8. Dan said in the episode that he did not remember what episode they were on, but I went back and verified this is indeed episode 8 for sure. He got confused because we have a whole bunch of bonus content for Around the Bird Bath on our Patreon. So if you sign up at almaaudible.com, hit the subscribe button, and you'll unlock all of our bonus episodes that Dan has been putting together with UTSA baseball alumni and myself and Adrian as well. But on this week's episode, he's joined by a longtime Patreon supporter himself, Cory Davis. Cory's a really good friend of Adrian's, and Cory was a total natural on the podcast, man. He was able to go stat for stat with Dan, which I didn't think we'd ever find anyone that could do that, to be honest with you. So we loved having Cory on. We hope to have him back in the future, whether this season or next. But real quick, before we cut over to the interview, I do want to say thank you to all of our supporters who keep this thing going, helping us make sure that Dan gets paid. Someone commented me that Dan needed his own NIL endorsement as a fan and media member, and I was like, hey man, we pay him. But if you guys think he deserves a raise, feel free to throw us a bunch of money at Patreon. We'll make sure we take good care of the guy. But thank you to our big money donors: Ben Tovar, Rick Cortez of Rowdy Road Grillers, the Bunch family, Zach Espericueta and the San Antonio Podcast Network, the Fikes family, and our board of trustees members Digiteek, John Otwell, Lino Perez of Los Dos Ready Tailgating, Gary and Ruben representing the UTSA Bird Gang Tailgate, Ray Redding and Meet Me Apparel, Brandon Grill and the Grill Realty Group, and Andy Elizada at Proficient Benefit Solutions. So I hope you guys enjoyed the rest of this episode as Cory and Dan recap briefly the Houston Christian game, the big come from behind win, walk-off hit by pitch, which is always crazy to see, and then also preview the upcoming road series in Birmingham against UAB, who has definitely struggled on the offensive side of the ball this year. So hopefully a good series for UTSA to gain some good momentum heading into this back stretch of the season and get that RPI shored up and ready to go for their run to Omaha. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you back next week.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Around the Bird Bath. I'm your host, Dan Nerdall. I'm going to be honest, I don't even know which episode this is because we've had a lot of bonus content lately. I think it's episode 7 in terms of schedule breakdowns, but we're back for another weekend preview. We're going to be looking at UAB and Rice as UTSA baseball is traveling to UAB and Rice is coming to town. We're also going to recap the dramatic win against Houston Christian last night. But first, I want to introduce my guest. Going a little different route this time, going the former student route, the baseball fandom route, if you will. I have Cory Davis. He is a UTSA alumni. He is a band and drumline alumni. He is a Almo Audible Patreon member. Currently a UTSA PhD student, another Astros fan. One of these days I'll get a Twins fan on here. Also a little bit of Red Bull racing, a little kind of gaming and Formula One action. Not as much right now, but Cory, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, Dan, I'm doing pretty good. Appreciate you inviting me on. I'm looking forward to doing this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an exciting season and it's not done yet. The team is not where they want to be yet, but things are moving up. They had quite the game last night, depending on when you're listening to this. We're recording this on Wednesday evening, but Houston Christian coming to town. Big talk was Lance Berkman, former Astros star, former Game 6 2011 World Series star for the St. Louis Cardinals, managing the program. It was interesting. I didn't see him. He didn't take third base as the third base coach. I haven't really seen the head coach all season not take third base, but I can understand, like, you're coming in your first season. Maybe you just want the routine of the guys out there, or you want to manage the dugout a little better. He's got that MLB style that you see with the manager in the dugout. But a 9-8, almost literal walk-off, hit by pitch, probably one of the few times Matt King is okay getting hit by a pitch with the bases loaded to win in dramatic fashion. What are your initial thoughts with last night's win?
Oh, he absolutely took that pitch. Watching it live. He didn't do an amazing job of trying to get out the way, but I mean, he definitely braced for the impact and took it. But it was a very worrisome start, I must say. Going down 6-0, I think it was in the third inning. Battled back to 6-3, and then I think it was 8-4, and eventually got it to 8-6 before the ninth. Not the kind of game you expect to see from a team like HCU with, I believe, is about seven or eight wins on the season. So a potential, trap game for sure. Um, but nice to see them grind it out, get some runs over time, and finish it off. But it made for a very exciting ending and surprise excitement on a Tuesday. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, and you have to be careful because the umpires, especially even at the college level, they did it once this year that I can remember for the opponent, but they'll call the batter back if they feel like he didn't make a solid effort of getting out of the way, or if he leaned into it, maybe. I think that since it was kind of on the inside of his elbow, it was hard to pick it up. And it came in pretty quick as well. It wasn't like it was a breaking ball and he had more time. But, a win's a win, and you got to get those types of wins. You mentioned falling behind early. Coach Hallmark talked about HCU just hits the ball really well, and they did that last night. I think they had 15 hits, maybe 16, and they still, even at the end of the game, they out hit the Roadrunners. And I know some people are a little concerned right now with the hitting after FIU and now HCU. UTSA still has a pretty good whip on the season. It's like 1.38 now after last night's game. But, they managed to pull out top performers, Caleb Hill, Josh Killeen, both at the plate and on the field. Obviously, you've probably seen it on Twitter if you're listening to this, but Caleb Hill's exciting, diving, leaping catch in left field in the top of the eighth inning, and then got it in enough time to double up the runner and go from, a runner scoring and a runner on second with no outs and a further deficit to keeping it to a two-run game, and all of a sudden getting out of the inning pretty quick. What were your thoughts? I know you're in Houston, so watching that on CUSA TV as best as you can with the camera angles, what were your thoughts watching that play unfold?
Oh, it was awesome. You don't really, at least at the college level, you don't get to see a lot of those amazing plays, those highlight reel plays as often as you do when you're watching major league ball or even minor league ball. The dive was phenomenal. I do want to give definite props to the fact that he absolutely nailed his cutoff man. Didn't try to overthrow it too much, get it all the way into first. He took the line. His cutoff guy, barely, I don't remember who was the one that took the throw. But yeah, he didn't even have to move, just textbook, get it in and get the 2 outs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and Barry was the one who took the relay, and I think the Ken's 5, I think it was Ken's 5, I don't think it was KSAT. Where they were set up was kind of down the first baseline. So from their highlights, if you saw those on Twitter, it showed Barry kind of getting position a little better than CUSA TV probably did, because you were watching the catch. But he was left of the bag, and then he moved right, and then Caleb Hill hit him right in the chest and just made that throw to Sammy Diaz to double him up. Hill also was 3 for 4 at the plate, 2 RBIs, 1 run, and a walk. The other, huge performance at the plate, Josh Killeen started with a 2-run home run early to start to claw back in the bottom of the third, and then got things going in the bottom of the ninth with an 0-2, not just 2 strikes, an 0-2 count, double in the gap, scores Barry, puts another running in scoring position. The other thing that Killeen did, and I'm sure the broadcast picked it up. I don't know how much Carl talked about it, but the batter actually in the 8th inning, I believe, on one of his swings followed through and clipped Killeen in the back of the head. And Josh had to take a moment, collect himself, stayed in the game, and then came up big in the bottom of the ninth. So, got rattled, but battled through and had that adversity or battled through that adversity that Coach Hallmark is always talking about.
Yeah, we it's not the perfect scenario, but as you said, win is a win. It won't hurt the RPI in this case. As you said before, thankfully it doesn't look at strength of the victory, but yeah, it was yeah, not a great team, but a nice comeback win. Thankfully they got this one done, unlike the final game against FIU, which for me was a little bit of a disappointment, but yeah, a win's a win. It was nice and exciting, and you could see on the broadcast that the players were very excited to do what they did. I think by the time they had stopped running, all of them were pretty much out, basically to the outfield fences in right field.
Yeah, it was exciting for sure to see them, and I mean, I think when you battle like that, you're just happy to pull it out, and I mean, it's just an exciting win. Couple guys on the mound I do want to highlight, and you know, people are probably like, we gave up 8 runs. Why are we highlighting the pitching? You know, and I already said this, but it's not that like Fisher Kingsbury was doing anything wrong. I mean, he was placing the ball and they were just hard hitting it and hitting it hard in the gap and in the holes and hitting their spots. Sometimes that's gonna happen. But Zach Royce came in with 2 on, or maybe even the bases low. I think it was 2 on, and he gave up a hit, but he went 2 in the third, gave up no runs, 4 strikeouts, really settled in. Probably, honestly, like, I don't know if you've been able to watch him much, but probably his best performance, I think, in terms of the situation he's coming into and being a freshman and being at home and just really settled in and helped keep the Husky batters at bay while UTSA could start to claw back and work their way back.
Yeah, he's not a guy that I've seen much of. And he pitched the 2 1/3 last night. And on the season, he's only thrown 8 innings total. So he hasn't had too much time, but as you said, freshman. But it's definitely one of those outings that can definitely build his confidence, but also build the coaching staff's confidence in him to where he may start seeing more times on the mound in big situations or in just games that we're leading, to maybe help start taking some of the pressure off of Simon Miller. But it was definitely a big time outing for him. And like you said, he's a freshman. He's got a lot of work ahead of him to get better, and he could very well be a staple on this pitching staff for a little while.
Yeah, and that's what we've heard before, from Coach Hallmark. You know, the depth, the options they have. I mean, last night, so they started with Fisher, Braylon Owens came in, Zach Royce, and then Ruger came in as well. He had an okay outing, not as good as he usually does. And then Ryan Beard came in to kind of wrap things up and actually earn the win. And it's funny. Sometimes I'll look at the box scores on UTSA Athletics and they credit a win to a guy. I'm like, yeah, he didn't pitch enough innings to get the win, because you do need to, even in college, you do need to go 5 full innings, have the win when you leave, keep the win. But last night they had it correct with Ryan Beard getting his second win of the season. And I mean, he's had some inconsistencies at some points this season. I don't know if he was working through some stuff, battling some stuff, but nice to see him do well and help kind of shut down the hitters as well. So
yeah, big time for him. Not especially because he's had definitely had a little bit of a walking issue for a lot of the season. He's thrown, I think it was about 23 innings with 16 walks. So it's not wonderful, but a nice outing where he did not allow any walks and just the one hit. So happy to see that. And you know, we'll see how his control is going forward for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up his strikeout to walk ratio. Let me see.
It's a 19-16.
Okay. Well, and D1 baseball, they'll break it down to like a 4.34.
So that's
so I mean, I'm sure 19-16 is just over 1. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll let
Well,
you're the
we'll say
engineer
it's
guy.
called like
I'll let
one.
you.
Yeah, it's probably something around, I think, like one and a quarter strikeouts to walk, roughly.
Okay. And now I want to see how anyway, we'll get back to that. We'll try to circle back to it. Because now I want to see how close you are with your estimate. But so yeah, I mean, exciting win. One more Tuesday game at the Bird Bath next week against Sam Houston State University. They just beat yesterday. They just beat Texas A&M 9-2. I think it was in College Station, and so they're going to have a similar win as UTSA and beating A&M at their home ballpark. They're atop the WAC right now. They're ahead of Grand Canyon. So they're going to be looking for a big win as they try to pad that regional argument and as they get ready for conference play, and UTSA as well. I mean, because those are the types of wins that can really help you when you beat another tough team like that and help you jump in the RPI. And then they'll have a week off, and then they'll travel to Abilene Christian. So one more Tuesday game to make it out there, see the Roaners at the Bird Bath, support the team. But let's move into this weekend. They are on the road at UAB. Similar to FIU, UAB is not having the best season. These games are going to be the 28th through the 30th of April. So Friday through Sunday. It's a little hard to figure out if it's going to be on TV or not. On the team's own schedules, they don't have CUSA TV listed, but if you go to the app, it says CUSA TV. So I guess we'll roll the dice and see if we're gonna have a broadcast or not. I don't know, but UAB, they're 13-27, 4-14 in conference. USA 5-11 at home. Last in Conference USA standings, all-time record 7-4. UTSA leads all-time record. Is this gonna be a trap weekend, you think, or is this gonna be another FIU where things are just looking kind of dicey all weekend? I mean, sorry, not Friday. Friday against FIU wasn't dicey, but is this gonna be another worrisome weekend, or what do you think?
I sure hope not. They're tied with FIU for worst record in conference right now. I think they're both 4-14. Looking at their just overall stats for runs allowed and runs scored, this should be a good weekend for us. But we are on the road, and as dominant as UTSA as we've been at home, it hasn't been as good on the road. We're 22-4 at home and 9-6 on the road. So it's, and obviously college baseball, the travel is pretty challenging and pretty difficult. But we definitely have the team that's capable of taking him down. And I will definitely be looking for and kind of expecting a bit of a sweep this weekend. And I think anything other than that, I think the team would be disappointed, but fans also would be a bit disappointed in anything else. Having said that, UAB does have a pretty solid pitching staff in terms of runs allowed. They're fourth in conference. But they have the worst offense in the Conference USA, and it's really not close. Rice averages just a hair over 5 runs a game. UAB is over a run less than that. They at 3.9 runs a game. So I think our pitching staff is set up to feast on this team.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, they're hitting 221 as a team, 294th in the NCAA. Base on balls, 195th with 164. And so, and there's some comfort in that because it seems like there's been times, not every single game, but it seems like there's been times where it takes UTSA a little bit to settle in. Like maybe the first, second, even third inning, they might get a guy on, but leave him at first or second, draw a few walks, leave him on second or third, and then they get settled in. They start pumping the runs through. They're really good at getting multiple run innings on the board, and so that always helps too. Get to that bullpen early, but the things I noticed with UAB, aside from their 204 RPI, their WHIP is 1.56, so that's okay. It's not great. It's not terrible, but their ERA is 5.33. So I don't know if they're like their runs allowed, because I know you mentioned though they're not terrible with that. So maybe they just don't give a lot of. Well, they definitely don't give up a lot of errors because their fielding percentage is 977, and that's good for 41st. So it kind of seems like if they do give up runs, they're earned runs, and whereas like UTSA, they're a little more prone to the errors, and so you might see some guys that I think I looked this morning and they have like 38 or 39 on the season.
Yeah, I was looking some stuff up on it too. Yeah, there's with college, just because fielding isn't as consistent. It's not that ERA is bad per se, but it definitely kind of can leave out some of the whole story. Just our guys are going to make a lot more errors. So we're roughly averaging about an error per game. And for the UTSA pitching staff on the season, we have about a 0.9 difference between ERA and runs allowed per nine. So that's not insignificant. So it's something I just, for me and myself, I like looking at a little bit more. So we'll, see what they can do. But it could definitely be a pretty well pitched weekend.
Mm-hmm.
But I expect our guys to come out just a little bit ahead in that regard.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned the full story, because the other thing, the official score, like I don't know like who they have in the press box doing the stats and scoring and everything, and there can be some type of plays where it's like, yeah, I don't know, that kind of looked like I've even seen sometimes this season where I'm like, oh well, that's an error for sure, and they rule as a hit, or I'm like, oh, that's a hit, and they rule as an error. I was like, okay. And that definitely affects that, and it gets confusing too, because and I probably should be better about this, but I've tried to read like the justification on like earned runs and everything, and there's a lot to keep track of on like if a runner is going to be an earned run or not, and then depending on how they advance even can factor in, and how they're brought in, obviously. So credit to the scorers that keep track of all that. I'm sure a lot of these people it's side jobs, volunteer jobs. So just the fact that they can do as good as they do overall. I do want to mention on the topic of money real quick. I want to go back to HCU. I don't know if you guys saw it on the broadcast, or I don't know if they talked about it, but one of the batters for Houston Christian hit a foul ball and shattered one of the lights. Did they pick that up for you guys?
I didn't notice it. What part of the game was that?
It was definitely later, because I mean the lights were on and he just hit it perfectly and just shattered it. And it's kind of like it's almost like that scene from The Natural, like the speckles of glass and fiberglass are just dropping down from and like the Houston Christian players are trying to get out of the way, and you got fans in the stands like, come on, we're broke, like we can't break lights. And I made sure to yell to Lance Berkman that he has to send us a check out of his life earnings, but hopefully he comes true on that and pays for that light. But
no, definitely missed that one from the broadcast.
Players to watch, and this kind of gets right back to what you're talking about with just their non-stellar offense, to put it nicely. They're leading the two guys that lead the team in home runs. They both have 5. So 5 home runs is all you need to lead UAB for home run hitters. And to put that in perspective, Layden Berry, he's a great hitter. I wouldn't call him a home run hitter. I think Layden Berry has 5 home runs on the season. So are someone who's probably middle of the pack for us in terms of home runs would be leading at UAB. Only 5 UAB Blazers have at least one home run on the season. So they've only had 5 guys that have hit a home run. And, you know, yeah, Braden Brown leads the team with 7 doubles. So, right, what you were talking about with underperforming offense. Pitching, we talked about that as well, but some guys to specifically look at. Where did I put their names? Oh, Carson Myers, Blaze Berry, Brooks Walton. Those are kind of their 3 main guys that seem to be their weekend guys. They all have 9 or 10 starts and 10 appearances. They've all logged over 50 innings. 2 guys have 50 Ks. The other guy has like 46. And then their whip is about average, a little higher than average. Their batting average on balls in play, that's over 300. So from your perspective and like what you like to look at and how you like to get into the weeds, if you hear, a batting average on ball and play over 300, they throw strikes because they've got a lot of strikeouts. Like how would you think the UTSA players are going to be approaching these guys?
Well, I know Carson has a little bit of a walking issue,
Yep.
especially more so than Blaze and Brooks. So him, I'm not sure which day, if he's like the Friday, Saturday, Sunday guy.
Mm-hmm.
But at least with him, I think it's going to be a much more patient approach, and just trying to slug whatever he can, because he gives up a lot of walks, but he doesn't allow a lot of big hits. He's only allowed 7 extra base hits on the season, and I did the math earlier. I think his slugging percentage against him is about 360. So he while he's walking a lot, he's not allowing a lot of super heavy contact. And that's allowed him to still have a pretty good ERA and runs allowed. The other guys don't walk as much, but give up more hits. And they're relatively pretty equal as looking at their stat lines between Blaze and Brooks. But I definitely would be looking for against Carson to be a little more patient, because he seems to be a little more wild, and so try to be more selective, where you can be maybe a little bit more free swinging with the other 2, because they'll stay more inside the strike zone.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's one thing, we've kind of seen all season with UTSA, and even like some of the former players. I think it was Chase King that said when he came on, he's like, I mean, Coach Hallmark, he doesn't want you swinging at balls. And I mean, that's every coach, right? Like I don't think there's a coach out there that would want you swinging at balls, but I think what Chase was saying and what he was getting at is Coach Hallmark is much more about making them come to you, making them earn their strikes, and being patient. And maybe you take a strike on the edge that the ump kind of gives to the pitcher, but hey, at least I didn't risk swinging at a ball. And so that patience to the plate for sure. UTSA, I mean, I don't know if they're going to match their home run number that they did last year. Last season was like 69. They're in the mid 40s right now, so it'd be tough to hit that unless they really went off against some of these worst teams. But I mean, doubles and triples all day. You hear Coach Hallmark say it from the third base coach's box. Doubles and jacks. So it'll be interesting to see if they can, and maybe that warmer Alabama weather, if they can have a nice weekend, the ball will start flying and they can take advantage of that. So I did want to say really quick, Ryan Beard's strike to walk ratio is 1.19. So you were
It's a little high,
0.06
but
off.
yeah, roughly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for ballparking it on the spot and doing math without a calculator, I would need my calculator. But yeah, it's outstanding. Any other things that you see with UAB that sticks out? before we move on to Rice?
And they got a couple of guys in their bullpen. Like they have a really pretty solid bullpen. I mean, there's every college pen is going to have guys at the back that are kind of there. But the front part of their pen is very solid. They've got four guys all with 10 plus innings and ERAs under 3.5 with pretty good amount of strikeouts. So hopefully whoever it is that starts the Friday game, we can wear them out quick and maybe get to some of these guys in the pen, and that'll help us throughout the entire weekend. Um, but I was very surprised at the pitching that UAB actually had. Was not expecting them to be quite as good on that front just based off of their record. But for their offense, I mean, they have two guys with an OPS over 800 on the season. And if you just look at their conference play, only one of their guys, Logan, I don't want to butcher his name, but Logan Braunschweig, is the only one on their team that's got an OPS over 800 in conference play. So I really think there's a very good chance for a lot of our pitchers to put up some pretty good numbers this weekend and get real deep into games.
Yeah, and Braunschweig, he's also not only just one of the only guys with an OPS over 800. He's the only guy hitting over 300, and then he's the only guy with an OBP over 400. So, and then as a team, 140 RBIs. So more of that bad offense. So we'll see. I mean, it's like I say this all the time. The listeners are probably tired of me saying it, but like in Major League Baseball, even the worst team is gonna win 60 some odd games, and even the best team is gonna lose 60 some odd games. It's what you do with the other 42 games that makes the difference. And so hopefully they can settle in, and not just because DBU and they actually based off winning percentage have a slight half game lead in the conference standings over UTSA. Both teams are tied or even at 31-10, and they've got the tied for eighth winning percentage in NCAA. But not just because you want to get those conference wins and inch closer to 40 wins, but you want to be playing good baseball going into conference play, going into regionals. We'll talk about this at the end, but the conference tournament is very important, and I want to get to Rice before we talk about that. And obviously, we still got a lot of baseball left before we get there, but just for the listeners, hold on that thought, and we'll get back to what I mean by that. So looking at Rice, it's at home, May 5th through the 7th. It's your normal 6 p.m., 2 p.m., 1 o'clock start times, Conference USA TV. It's going to be the second time that we're facing them this season, the only team that from conference play that they're facing twice. I did notice, so there's three teams that UTSA has faced twice, like not in different like series, if you will. One of those was a standalone game down in Corpus Christi. We know how that went, 8-2 deficit. UTSA's largest deficit of the season. The other two were the home and aways against UIW and Texas State. But UTSA this year is 0-3 when they face teams the second time.
Did not realize that little tidbit. I mean, I knew because they had a weekend series against A&M Corpus, and then a weekday game against them, and yeah, because they split the home and home with Texas State, I believe, because I think it was they won in San Marcos and then lost in San Antonio. And I don't remember which way it went for UIW, but yeah, I mean, it's only 3 games to really look at, so I don't think I can. I mean, I won't read anything into it. That's way too small of a sample for me. But
yeah.
And UTSA is definitely the better team there. Rice is, as we kind of mentioned UAB is the worst offensive team in CUSA, and Rice is there's a pretty sizable gap between UAB and Rice, but Rice is the second worst offensively. So there's definite. I mean, we saw it in the series against them the first time, um, where it wasn't for the most part. I mean, with the exception of the second game that Rice won, there it wasn't super high scoring, and I kind of would expect that to continue here. Um, but I would say Rice has one really, really good starter. My
Mhm.
goodness. What's this? Parker Smith? Good Lord.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I noticed that too. I mean, 1.89 ERA, 62 innings pitched, 65 strikeouts, only 15 walks. Getting back to that strike per walk ratio, 4.36, 1.03 WHIP, and an opponent's batting average of 221.
And he was the Friday starter of the first series that when we saw Rice at in Houston. And that's that and that was a game that I went to along with Adrian, Jared, and there's a pretty good crowd for that game. And I mean that explains why it was held at 2-2 for so long. You had Luke Malone and Parker Smith going, so it was a pretty darn good pitcher's duel.
Yeah, and it would have been fun to see Luke go 7, 8 innings in that one and see kind of who's able. There's been a couple of times this season where a team just has kind of a similar situation where their Friday guy is kind of their best guy coming out of their options, and Luke is going toe to toe with him, and it's like, all right, who's gonna get to the other guy first, or whose team is gonna help them get to the other guy first. And I mean, one of Luke's losses this year, excuse me, it was that 1-0 against St. Mary's, the first game of the series on Friday night, and I think Luke went 8 full innings, maybe even 9. He might have even gone all 9 innings, but just couldn't get any run support. Just one of those nights, and he loses the pitcher's duel. But yeah, Parker Smith definitely um, the best thing that Rice has to offer in terms of consistency and toughness coming out of your starters. Their other main guy, like JD McCracken, a lot of walks with not as many strikeouts, 5.68 ERA, but then half of his appearances are starts, half a relief. So maybe he's not even. Maybe you might not even see him on the weekend. And I could see Rice trying to mix it up since they've already seen UTSA, seen them before. We'll see what type of gamemanship there is from the teams. I know this is always a big one for the players. Chase King mentioned that they kind of consider Rice their rivals, but then also especially with the Coach Hallmark connection of him being a player at Rice, and then that's where he got his coaching career started, kind of after this time in the minors. So, any other things you see with Rice? Any things to maybe watch out for that we haven't talked about already, or?
There's another guy in there, mostly in their bullpen. He's only had one start, but Tyler Hamilton. On the season, he had his numbers don't look his ERA at least doesn't look great. He's got 20 innings on the season, but he's got a 5.6 ERA on the season. But in conference play, that's only at a 1.5. And looking at his game logs, he had 2 really bad outings. One where he gave up 5 runs against Stanford, and then one where he gave 5 runs against Stanford in 1 inning, and then another outing where he gave up 4 runs in 1 inning against UH. Every other outing he's had has been just absolutely stellar. So those couple of ones, I don't know if what his issues may have been there, but he looks like another huge weapon for them coming out of their bullpen, as well as Justin Long for Rice. So they've got a couple of studs in there for sure, that could prove difficult to go up against. But as long as our guys do their jobs, keep doing what they've been doing. I mean, we still do have the best offense by OPS and runs per game,
Mhm.
pretty much any other major, um, you know, offensive category in Conference USA. So, there we've got some horses here for uh, to go after these guys, and I expect some nice tough at bats, both from their pitchers and our hitters to see.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that's interesting, just talking about how a team can be um, in relation to their record, both Rice and UAB. I think Rice, their strength of schedule was 57, UAB's was 58. I don't know if like the metrics and how the math works. I don't know if like if you're a worse team, if that kind of benefits your strength of schedule because you're always playing teams better than you. Um, and so maybe there's some kind of like take that with a grain of salt. But UTSA 22-4 at home. Again, you also kind of have to look at that a little differently because the first month of the season you're playing non-conference teams. You got all those. I think the first like 4 weekends in a row they were at home at the Bird Bath, and not the best teams coming in. Some teams didn't pan out the way maybe UTSA would have liked to help that kind of RPI factor, but you're obviously playing more games at home. You're more comfortable at home. You're not traveling. You already mentioned that, but important to consider that something about that Bird Bath magic.
Yeah, they definitely like playing at home. And obviously, as you said, the some of the early opponents aren't the strongest. So it kind of buffs that a bit. But even in conference, they're still 9-0 at home and haven't lost a game yet. Not trying to jinx. But 9-0 at home and then 5-3 on the road. So that's some. So our guys are obviously very comfortable. You get to wake up in your own bed. You've got your process that you go through. So while we took 2 out of 3 from Rice in Houston, I think we have a very very good chance to sweep a big weekend from Rice at home. Um, Obviously, at bare minimum, you want to see 2 out of 3, but especially after dropping the finale to FIU, you need those extra every little bit of extra wins that you can get for that seeding that'll eventually happens when we do get to the conference tournament. Because right now we are a half game back because we didn't get won the loss against FIU, but we lost a game that got canceled against Charlotte.
Yeah, and that one was, what's unique about the Charlotte and the FIU series. Um, so the Charlotte weekend was a Thursday through Saturday. It was like that because of Easter. The teams don't play on Sunday. No games are scheduled, but so that was tough because they had the game on Tuesday. They traveled to Charlotte on Wednesday. Right away, rain is messing things up, and you're switching schedules around. You're doing double headers. In game 2 against Charlotte, like they got off to a 5-0 start, and then there was a 3-hour rain delay. That's gonna just course of nature. I feel like that's gonna always benefit the home team over the traveling team because you're already traveling. You like where are you gonna relax? Where are you gonna hunker down? Are we gonna play or are we not? Are we gonna get warmed up? And then obviously that third game got canceled. Same thing against FIU. They get the Friday game in. They look great. It's 22-6. It's like a 4-hour game where they got 22 runs. But then Saturday, you get to the bottom of the 7th inning. Now it's raining cats and dogs, and you got to move that to Sunday. So now you're playing a 12-inning game essentially, starting at 8 o'clock. You're still adjusting to the chime change. I'm not trying to make excuses in any way, and Coach Hallmark wouldn't either, or none of those guys would. But these are just kind of the things you're dealing with, and it can make it tough. So hopefully, against Rice, they can, or UAB and Rice, just get the games in, start on time, not have delays, and just be able to play baseball. But you mentioned DBU. You mentioned the conference tournament. Are you going out to any of the games in Houston, or are you already making plans, arrangements, or what's?
I was. It's a little bit in the air now because obviously going down to Rice for me is really easy.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I now have to do a trip to San Jose, California for research presentation to do with my um, PhD at UTSA, and it happens to be that week. I don't remember exactly the days that the tournament starts, but I know I'll be out of state now for at least the first couple of days. My hope is I can, they make it to the final and I can go watch the final on, I think it's Sunday.
yeah.
Um, but no, it is very much my desire, having it since it is in Houston, that I am down there for, at bare minimum one game. But yeah, that's a little in jeopardy at the moment for me.
Yeah, so for those listening, it starts Wednesday morning. Don't really know. It just depends on seeds and everything. Like when UTSA would play on Wednesday, it's double elimination. So one loss does not necessarily mean you're out. I mentioned earlier that kind of nightmare scenario, and what I've been telling people, and this is from the fan, the Almo Audible perspective of being able to look at things a little differently, but if somebody other than DBU or UTSA wins the conference tournament, I think that's probably the nightmare scenario, because now you're asking the committee to put two Conference USA at large teams in. DBU is like right now they have the better RPI, and I think people are more drawn to them. I don't know. Like, I mean, I would hope that in that moment, in that situation, the committee would just look at who's the most deserving, and if UTSA has the RPI. And I don't want to try to get ahead of ourselves because we still have like three weeks of the season left before we're even at that point. But um, I guess from your perspective or your thoughts, like how important is that weekend, and is there a scenario where maybe neither of those teams win, but they both still go to regionals?
And I mean, obviously there's a chance for anything to happen.
Of course, yeah.
I can't say I'm very well versed on how these committees like to pick their teams. Um, last year, obviously La Tech won the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Very heartbreaking way to lose it, but Western Kentucky didn't even make top two, and they got their at large bid. We, however, did not. Now the team last year was not as good as this year's. Um, I think it's if there's pretty much absolute guarantee that one of the two teams will make it. Um, and then so maybe come down to like roll the dice. And then also how the bigger conference, the Power Five guys, how those tournaments go with, are the expected winners winning, or is there some underdog that no one was really expecting to do gonna shake things up at the top, which then hurts all the mid majors to where we get a little bit less. Um, I think regardless, as long as UTSA continues to do what they do, what we've been doing, have a strong conference tournament even without a win, um, because we've been ranked, we've been up in that mid 20s. It's a 64 field, uh, re, uh, like all was it 64 teams I believe make regionals.
Yeah, 64 teams. There's 30 conferences, so there's usually 34 at large spots up for grabs. The SEC, they usually take about 10 of them, like regardless of how. Yeah, they're gonna. I think they usually make like they get like 8 or 9 regional teams every year. So
Yeah, I think at this point, what would prevent UTSA from, as assuming they don't win the tournament, um, is having if we have having a bad weekend against Dallas Baptist and Rice, La Tech hasn't been that great this year. I don't. They're kind of been in the middle in terms of the conference. But it's as long as UTSA does their job, even with a couple of more conference losses, I think as long as we make a deep run, at least one of the final three teams in the tournament, I'm not too worried about not getting in that large bid.
Yeah.
It just may be a little more difficult to go watch the regional for us.
Yeah, and that was D1 baseball. They've got UTSA number 25. That's who I kind of reference when I mention the number in front of UTSA, not because the other ones don't matter. I just feel like because that's what the NCAA.com is pushing out, it's just more consistent. But in their projections today that they dropped, and now that we're at the point in the season that we are, they're going to be dropping those every week. I imagine the same, midweek days. It gives them time after the weekend to kind of make their adjustments and everything. But they had UTSA as the 2 seed out in the Eugene regional. So Oregon, obviously UTSA, Loyola, and one of the California teams, I think Cal State Fullerton. So I feel good about that. I mean, the travel is a bummer. It'd be tough to make out of Eugene, just location and getting out there. But that's a good regional to feel good about. You're obviously the 2 seed, so they're like, hey, you're the second best team in this regional. I saw someone today on Twitter mention, oh, I like this better than a Texas, A&M, UTSA, and some other team regional at Wolf Stadium. I think, on one hand, it's like this may be the more favorable regional, but regionals are a clean slate. I think getting 3 Texas teams at Wolf Stadium, that place would be popping. And I think it'd be insane. I think it'd be an incredible atmosphere. And I mean, Texas and Texas A&M have both been inconsistent this year, so why not, right?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those. It's kind of one, double-sided coin. You like on one hand, you would love that atmosphere and the vibe to an opportunity to go and just kind of stick it to the big brother schools, so to speak. But then on the other side of that, it's definitely be a little bit, I guess, more nervous because at least historically those have been better teams. Like I don't, and for A&M at least this year, I'm not super sure on really how they've been playing. I know, obviously a midweek game, while it looks good for us, it's how much weight does it really hold when neither team is throwing their best pitchers out there? But the atmosphere alone, I think, of all those Texas teams in one stadium would be amazing, and I would be there for every little bit of it.
Yeah, for sure. Not to mention, how can I say this nicely, where I can keep doing what I'm doing? The appreciated pressure it would put on the current athletic department administration for hosting at someone else's ballpark. I think that would kind of hopefully open up some eyes and be like, hey, maybe we want to make some changes so we can have this on campus and fully benefit. Because you got to imagine Nelson Wolf would be taking a cut of that.
For sure. There's, if nothing else, there's ticket sales that they would be getting.
Yeah.
And in that case, if UTSA is able to, open up a lot of eyes around, around the nation of, hey, there's a baseball program here and it's doing pretty solid. Just like with football there, that's where the money starts flowing in. And I will say going down to the Rice game, that is a beautiful ballpark. It was gorgeous. The view of Houston, looking out into the outfield was just amazing. And so being able to have something of that kind of vibe. Now, obviously, we're not really going to see a downtown skyline on campus, but the quality of the facilities, it makes you feel good going to watch a game there. It's like this is a really, really good place for an afternoon with the guys and go watch a game.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we got a little taste of that against Texas State with where they were at. Biggest highest attendance game of the season, like 1,095. Obviously, like, the ROTC detachment was having a recognition night, so they had a lot of people out there. But then obviously fans traveled in from San Marcos. It was getting a little feisty on the berm, so I had to go back to the bleachers because I was probably going to get myself in trouble with some Texas State fans.
I would
But
say, are the bad birds out there?
they are. They've been out there from time to time. They're all doing bigger and better things now, working real jobs and stuff. So it's hard for them to get out every game, but they definitely have some great wit and some great chirping to them, and that'd be the other thing too, like getting them closer to the field. Like, you want to be respectful, you want to let the players play, but they have fun with it because they're pretty clever sometimes with what they can spout out, or spout off. Well, so I think we've covered everything pretty good. At the end of the day, this weekend, next weekend, the rest of the season, they just got to do what they've been doing. Just play baseball, get back. They're doing the right things. They've got the skill. They've got the battle in them. Now you just got to hope it all falls into place, and that they kind of control their own destiny in a way. And so that's always good to see. But any last thoughts from you, Cory? Any last bits you want to add in before we sign off here?
Um, no, I was debating on this, but I do want to say who the one guy on UTSA's roster that I want to see more step up a little bit more in the middle of the lineup. And this might sound a little bit crazy if you're just looking at his overall season, but it's going to be Antonio Valdez. His numbers on the season, I mean, he looks phenomenal. 1100 OPS, tons of extra base hits. He's got eight home runs, on base on base of 467. But he has struggled quite a bit in conference play. And the midweek games, early season, is where a lot of his productions come from. And so in conference play on the weekends, his OPS drops down to just under 800 at 795, and he's only got 4 extra base hits in conference play. He's still getting on base at a really good clip at 380, still drawing his walks and getting some hits. But he's definitely lacking the superstar moments that he's been having throughout the season and non-conference play. He can do wonderful things. He's also our only real base stealing threat, which I love getting to watch. These guys swiping bags is amazing.
Yeah.
And so if he's able to just do what he does in those other games, I don't know if what may be really causing the difference. But I really like watching him play and the stuff that he's done. But I'd definitely like to see him step up a little bit in these conference games. Because if he can do that, the team's already very, very good. And the offense is great. If he can step up just that little bit, it'll take the roster to a whole new level with what we can do, especially once we finally go up against Dallas Baptist, because they also have a really good pitching staff.
Yeah. And for those listening, the Dallas Baptist preview, that will be in a few weeks. I think that'll actually be the next preview, maybe.
I believe it's the series after Rice.
Yeah. So that would be the next preview then. But yeah, I mean, I think they're like top 5 or 6 in strikeouts in NCAA. And there's been some times this season where like UTSA has had those double-digit strikeouts from the offensive standpoint. But you mentioned Valdez, and I noticed that too because he was on pace. I mean, he got to 40 RBI super quick and was on pace. The single season record UTSA alumni Alamo Audible around the Birdbath visitee Trent Lockwood has the record at 79. And I mean, it was looking like Valdez was going to hit that and surpass it and more. Now I think he's at like 45, 46, 47, somewhere around there.
51 to be exact.
Okay, 51. So yeah, they added him up. The last time I checked was a few days ago, but so he's still. So let's see, we got, what is it, 15, 41, like 15 games left. So he would need about, one or like 2 RBIs every
He
game.
needs some monster games to round out the season.
And maybe he will, I hope that there's been several times this season where like I've mentioned something, whether on Twitter or on the podcast, and then the next performance, like, to no credit of mine, just coincidence in how baseball is, like, they're like, oh, like, yeah, we saw the tweets, like, we'll show you what we can do. So hopefully he goes off this weekend and has like 7, 8 RBIs,
Oh, I would love to see him go off like that this weekend.
Yeah. But yeah, tune in. I know I mentioned on Twitter, if you saw it earlier, today being Wednesday, that some unsureness on if the streams were going to be available or not. I just saw someone else mention me on Twitter that on the app, it looks like there's a video screen there or a video camera on the schedule for that game. So tune in this weekend to the UAB games. And then if you're in the area and if you have the time, come out to the Rice games next weekend. But as far as tonight, that's it from us. Thank you so much, Cory, for coming on. Thanks for listening. And this has been Around the Birdbath.